You're good.
Perfect. Let us bring this meeting to order. And first thing on our work session agenda is the Innovation and Magnet Schools expansion update.
Trustee Simpson, trustees, good to see you this evening. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk with you a little bit about some of the expansion opportunities that we have in our district. I think we have some exciting opportunities to share with you this evening. What I'll do is I'll just do a general overview of that, do it quickly, and then we have some of the administrators here if you'd like to have some questions and answers about that. So the first one is New Horizons. You know, a couple of years ago, we decided to expand the program, continue on so that we could have a K-8 program there. We are going to continue with that. Peter, would you go to the slide? Yeah. So that they will be moving from the 7th grade, which they currently have now. There are 66 students in 6th and 7th grade. As you know, that system, they onboard at kindergarten, and they move through the system. So that our 7th graders will move into 8th grade. Looking to keep around 45-ish, that's a general number, to roll up. And you'll see 8th grade there, we have approximately 30 students. Oh, so sorry, 45 in 5th grade. Looking to roll up about 30 students in 8th grade. One thing that we do in all the schools is try to get input from the staff and the parents. And so the staff have been a big part of the planning of expanding the middle school programs there. They hold plenty of staff meetings. The staff also gets together to design the curriculum about what the 8th grade will look like. So they're working on that. Parental input, they continue to get parental input from their parents. And they ask a lot of questions around electives, what things do parents like to see in their schedules and whatnot. So that's continuing. And then the general timeline you'll see there, and a lot of the timelines are tentative, but right now they're looking at having their kindergarten lottery in April. So we're excited to see 8th grade and have that be a full K-8 program next year. Park Ridge. If you remember a couple of years ago, we were having discussions around Park Ridge because there were rural enrollment about things that we could do. And we held several town hall meetings with the parents there. We had 3 of them actually. One of the things that we heard there was they really wanted a smaller environment for their middle school options and possibly expand that. A couple of years ago, we moved Treasure Valley Leadership Academy into that building as well, so we can utilize the space a little bit better and get a little bit better facility for that school as well. So what we're looking at doing there is expanding Park Ridge and moving that into starting 6th grade. So the 5th graders would roll into 6th grade. And then TVLA would look at expanding down into 8th grade. So we have 6th and 8th there next year, with the idea then of allowing the 6th graders to move into 7th grade, and we'd have actually a K-12 program. There's still 2 different schools at this point. Mr. Jordan is working with Park Ridge around their expeditionary learning focus, and looking forward to next year of continuing that and getting some professional development. That's a big.
Talk about it in the morning, and what are we supposed to tell these people? Because Kathleen sent out this email and acts like even if they're negative, they have to stay home for 10 days.
And then looking at 8th grade as well, working with the TVLA leadership team to kind of expand that and provide some of those options for those students that may like a smaller environment. Parental input, this came from many of this is from the town hall meetings. They still do updates and inform their parents about their EL focus and some of the newsletters. So that was continuing. Mr. Jordan will be working with more parents and providing information as they talk and expand their programs. The timeline, they're looking at doing a lottery in the spring for TVLA for that 8th grade, and looking at communicating with our current 5th graders to talk to them about the 6th grade program and 6th grade options that they could have. And then the last one is Union High School. So as you know, Union High School is a big picture learning school. Big picture, actually, many of the schools are 612 programs. Ours has always been historically a high school program. But this year, the leadership team has been working closely on developing a 612 program, like many of their sister big picture schools around the country. And so Union is looking at expanding 6th, 7th, and 8th grade and bringing on a class of 20 in each of those grade levels for a total of 60 students. The leadership team works very closely together, has been very excited about this opportunity of providing really a hands-on learning experience. That's one of the big focuses of big picture learning, is students be able to get to not only explore options for their careers, but to be able to get some to the hands-on opportunities. And so It provides great mentoring possibilities as well for our current TVLA students to be able to mentor some of the younger students. And we're excited about having that opportunity over there. Parental input, they're looking at getting a survey out to their parents, having their advisors talk with some of the parents and have some discussions around how that could work with 6th, 7th, 8th graders there. So this is a very tentative timeline right now. They're still subject to change, but you can see there are some of the things that they'll be doing in April and February is getting approval and kind of moving through there and working with some of our middle schools to talk about some of the alternatives that they could have for some of those kids who might fit well into this program. And then they'll work at doing some recruiting promotion here in April and March. April and May, they would like to finalize their students and get some logistics on planning schedules. And then in August and July, hire staff and develop some of the learning plans for some of those 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So kind of an exciting opportunity there in Union High. So that was a real quick brief overview. I know that, but I'm happy to answer questions that I can, or some of the leaders are available as well.
Any questions?
I do. Thank you for the presentation, and seems like a lot of changes for that middle school section. What was the driving factor that prompted this need to start expanding our middle school options?
I think a lot of it started when we were having those town halls at Park Ridge. Some of the needs from the parents were asking for smaller environments for their kids or more options for their kids. We also see that there are some students in our middles that currently struggle in that format, and having places to put some of those students. A couple of years ago, we've had some students that just haven't fit, and we've had to look at alternative options. So what we're trying to do is maybe find some alternative, smaller environments, maybe some environments that would tailor towards their learning styles, smaller classrooms, more hands-on learning, possibly doing some more internship type things or exploring careers and those type of stuff. So I think there's kind of a variety of reasons for that.
One quick follow-up question. So historically, our union and our TV have been that alternative for the high schools, and there is a clear, I think, state guideline that we're allowed to follow for our graduation requirements and things like that. How does that work with middle school?
Well, there is no graduation credits associated to it, right? So it's a matter of informing the state about having the programs at the middle level. There is obviously certain classes that they would want to fit so that they can be prepared to enter the college credit or the high school credit system. So it's a matter of just kind of working out the logistics of what can be offered, what classes are offered in our comprehensive middle schools, and scheduling it really. So there is much more flexibility in the junior high.
There's, yeah.
Yes.
And just a point of clarification, TVLA is not all alternative at-risk qualified school. It's an innovation school, but we don't have to meet those state benchmarks at TVLA.
Okay, so one's an alternative, one's an innovative, but they both
Yeah, they're both innovative. And then we also take opportunity at Union to benefit from the at-risk funding.
Thank you. My last follow-up question.
Go ahead.
When we have Park Ridge expand then to that 6th, do we have to reclassify that school?
We have to tell the state that we're adding a grade level, but that's the only, when you say
Okay.
reclassify.
For an innovative or something
Yeah,
different
so
other than our standard
Park Ridge
elementary?
will not come under the innovation TVLA, and then we'll explore that. I will, by the time it's there, we'll be ready to talk about renewing it or not.
And most of those 5th graders have the option to either continue there with 6th or go to their traditional
Yes.
middle.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
And we will advertise across the district, so not just the Park Ridge 5th graders.
Okay.
Moving into 6th will have this opportunity, but we'll focus.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Dr. Russell, Superintendent, just kind of from my understanding, so we have innovation agreements. Is it for TVL, for Park Ridge one and for Union?
For TVLA and Union.
So those would stay the way they are now, and then you would expand it and we'll just
Currently, yes.
revisit it again.
And next time as it comes up at Union with the middle school there, that may impact that or may not. We'll have to revise that there, but obviously currently right now, TBLA would still be a separate school from Park Ridge. If that ever does come a K-12 program, we have to explore whether we choose to continue the innovation or not.
Dr. Russell, I think when these were originally done, the teachers were treated a little differently, but we since aligned it with how we treat all teachers.
Right, yeah, so, yeah, they were designed a little bit separate from the master contract. I do know that both schools have desired to follow the master contract and a lot of the same agreements and ways. So technically, it's still innovation does allow them to have some of that freedom, particularly in how they report accountability is where it gives them that freedom, but really much of the actual working conditions, they strive to follow our master contract.
Any other? Trustee Keller, did you have any questions? She's muted, but I just wanted to give her a moment if.
Yeah, thank you so much, Madam Chair, for giving me the opportunity. For clarification for myself, can you help remind me what kind of the credentials are that for a school like Union at the high school level and now maybe going toward the middle school level, what kinds of students are we looking for? I know you say and use the words maybe at risk, or are there qualifications, or is it just for any kid who maybe isn't working well in the traditional type of education? Are we recruiting based on kids who are struggling, or I'm just not quite sure how that transition works. An explanation would be helpful.
Great question. I'll take a stab at it, but I also have Ms. LaPrath on, and she could clarify any things I may not have. But we're really looking for a student who, a variety of things. One is they could be struggling in the traditional school, just as you had mentioned. They could be behind in grades, or they could just not maybe have that social connection that they would like to have. TBLA does have a smaller environment, which will allow them to have that. It could be a student who really needs to see the value of their education, explore career opportunities. And so they could be head to a place like Union, which really kind of gears students for seeing how their education can lead to steps outside of school. It could be, they could fit any of those at-risk categories. Now, we typically have at-risk in the middle school. Well, I guess we do qualify them there, but if we see that they fit some of that needs, then that could be an option for them as well. And as Ms. LaPrath could probably share, their vision for that school is to really get a lot more hands-on learning opportunities, much like the big picture schools that they're sisters with. And it could be a student that could just really value that opportunity to be able to build things. And some of the schools have, maker spaces, they have studios, they have art rooms, they have shop rooms where they can just build and create and share their learning. So Melissa, is there anything that you would add that I may have forgotten?
You did a great job, Greg. I think that is correct that they are at risk. So the state actually outlines what that criteria is, and students do have to qualify either in one category multiple times, or there's another category where it's just a single qualification that aligns them with at risk. When it comes to recruitment, we really open our recruitment up to anyone in the district. Our word has started to spread outside of the district as well. And so we bring those students in, we then vet them as part of the application process to make sure that they're meeting those at-risk qualifiers as well. But basically at-risk means that they're at risk of not graduating for a variety of reasons. And so we're really helping to target and help ensure that those students are getting an education that they find valuable and meaningful so that they reach that graduation and actually the go on aspect as well.
Thank you so much. That was very helpful. I think that's just an exciting thing that we have to offer kids in our community. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
I just had one question. So in my mind, Park Ridge and TBLA and Union are a little bit different than New Horizons, but correct me if I'm wrong. Where New Horizons really is, you start at kindergarten and you work through, we're not recruiting for sixth graders who haven't gone through a dual language program, right? Is that
That's generally correct. I suppose
Okay.
there would be a student who studied and has the bilingual skills. But generally they don't come to us with both of those skills fully developed.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then I just wanted to kind of talk through this. As y'all know, this may look very different and feels a little bit different. We're trying something new. And so I guess as board chair, I just wanted to kind of point out things like, so is this something that we will need to take action in the next meeting, or is this information only? And so I kind of wanted to give trustees a heads up as we're moving forward, as we're trying to transition to a different way of scheduling our meetings.
I don't know the answer. I couldn't find the under 33.512 where it exactly laid. Certainly the Park Ridge plan we brought to the board a couple of years ago, and as we moved those programs in, we'd already talked about that. TVLA is, expanding down, is a new concept. Union, we came to the board and added 8th grade, or let you know. So I don't know what the answer to that is, Chairman Simpson.
Okay. I know in those same things, I remember that there was plans to add and expand and to do some of those different things, conversations moving forward. But yeah, that question will probably come up with each topic, just so you're aware that, just so as we move forward, we know what this might look like.
Yeah, Chairman Simpson, that's what I was thinking about the innovation agreement. So we approved that. So what's new here? I mean, the district established New Horizons. It's nice to know. I'm assuming we can pay for everything and that there's demand for it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Any other questions? I do want to remind folks that also the setup of this is, that if we do have questions, we also can be emailing superintendent.
Yes.
And Dr. Russell as well, to reach out to ask those questions as well. Thank you. Excellent. Next on our list. Oh, I lost my agenda, sorry.
Social emotional learning.
Thank you. I knew it was one of those two, yes.
And Phyllis Vermillier is here to present the information around social emotional learning.
Actually, it's going to be Lori, and she should be.
And Lori is here online with Phyllis's backup.
I am here, Peter, would you be able to put up the Word document that has the update?
That's the other one. Yeah. It's going well to work.
And we can do it this way too. So just hold, just stop. We'll do this one first.
Sorry.
You got it.
Oh, there we go. There we go. In front of you, you have the social emotional learning professional development plan that we had for this year. And we just wanted to take a minute and update you on these items. And before we get started, I just wanted to thank Phyllis Vermillier for her assistance in putting this together, this whole presentation. She put in a lot of time, and so thank you, Phyllis. But overall, we have made progress on all of the components of the plan at varying degrees. We've had to flex due to the chaotic nature of the year, which we probably don't need to go into. But we've worked really hard to offer PD both at a time and in a way that it can be accessed and utilized by our staff. Right now, they have been asked to learn so much and so many unusual things that we've been really cautious about going down the PD, continuing down the PD continuum, unless we felt like we were in a space to learn and grow from those things. And we appreciate the feedback from the teachers as we have gone down the road. But a couple of highlights for you. I know you have that in front of you, so I'm not going to read it word for word, but a couple of updates for you is that, one, all of our NSD staff have accessed professional development for supporting trauma-informed classrooms through our work with Keith Orchard. We had an opportunity to meet with him again, everyone, elementary and secondary, different groups in October. Some schools have done a deeper dive with Keith Orchard, and that work was being paid for by either the YCAP grant or the Blue Cross Community Grant, depending on what grade levels have been served. And so some schools have done that deeper dive, and that's been under the direction of their principal and in partnership with Keith. We have been working on modules. So our fantastic PBI coordinator and our PBI SEL coach have been developing these really fantastic modules that introduce each of the 5 CASEL competencies: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. We're a little bit behind where we had wanted to be, but again, when you are making such drastic changes in your year, it's really hard to take in information. So we want to release those and get those to teachers when it is the right time. And a little note on this, we are moving ahead and we'll adjust our timeline as much as needed, but a little note that our team is partnering with NNU at NNU's request to build an administrator course on the basics of SEL, and these modules will be part of that work. And so we're really grateful to partnership with them and for them to have recognized the work that's happening here at Napa School District around SEL. The last thing that I wanted to highlight from this update is our district leadership is partnering with Shannon McGuire, who's a mediator and a facilitator known throughout the Treasure Valley, to help us strengthen our awareness of our biases and creating safe spaces for all students. And so right now, we as a group are exploring our own experiences in preparation for exploring our students' student experiences. And Micron is actually, this is kind of a new development, that Micron is actually helping us fund Shannon's time, and we're working with them on some other SEL projects as possible grant opportunities. So we're really grateful for our community partners in helping us put together this professional development work. Are there any questions on this part of the update on the PD plan?
None. Trustee Keller, just wanted to pause and.
Yeah, none for me, thank you.
Thanks. Oh, I think we're good.
Okay, now we can go to the data. Thank you, thanks, Peter. One of the things for tonight is I really kind of wanted to walk through what was involved in this PowerPoint. And so my ask of you is that as we go through this, if you have a question on a slide, that we just ask that question at the time that we're on the slide. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So what you're seeing right here is in the beginning is just a reminder that these are the K-5 social emotional standards. These are standards that were chosen, that principals chose straight from the CASEL standards. So these directly align with those 5 CASEL competencies that I just talked about in the modules. What you're seeing here is the scale that we're using to track students' progress. So if a parent saw a 2 on one of those standards, it would mean that that student would need some prompting to be able to participate well or actively engage in proficiency in that standard. I do want to, before we move forward, I want to let you know that last year we were scoring on all of those standards. This year, with the chaos of sometimes we were online and sometimes hybrid, schools really had the freedom to determine when during the year they will begin to be able to assess students on these standards. So what you're going to see tonight is kind of like watching data come in on an election night, where we can see progress, but it's not really going to be complete until we finish that 3rd trimester. So what you're going to see tonight is really based on our 1st trimester data compared to our 1st quarter last year. But then 2nd trimester ends in February, and we'll add some more data and have a more complete picture. So thank you. So this is the first, this is the second year that we've had our performance indicators for kindergarten. And these performance indicators are examples of what actions a student who's proficient in that standard would be showing. And this work was done with kindergarten teachers, where their input was all put together to create these performance indicators. They did a great job reviewing and really talking through and getting clear about what a kindergartner would look like. And if you can link from your board packet and look at all of those SEL performance indicators if you would like for each of those standards. So on this slide and the next slide, you'll see a comparison based on standard between, again, Q1 of last year, the 1920 school year, and trimester 1 of the 2021 school year. And you'll see those differences. One of the things, again, to be aware of is that that trimester data is not complete yet. So that is a portion or a percentage of our students. And there's the rest of them. And these three standards are kindergarten standards. And these are areas where we are showing growth between last year's cohort and this year's cohort. We're seeing that students are following schools and classroom routines and procedures better. Resolving conflicts in a constructive manner, and contributing to the successful completion of group tasks through cooperation and compromise at higher rates so far.
So can I just ask really quick to make sure I'm understanding it? So it's last year's kindergartners that were on a quarter system to this current year's kindergartners that are on a trimester system. Okay. Thank you.
Correct. Yes. And then this, yes, this standard 4.0 is one where we've seen a decrease in proficiency. This is the first year that we've had first grade performance indicators. So I want you to keep that in mind as we look at the next little set of data, is that we had those overall broad standards that we're working in from all grade levels, but this is the first time that we've had kind of those specific tasks that a teacher might look for or have some comparison ideas as they look at a student being proficient. And here are first grade looking at last year's Q1 to this year's trimester 1 on each of those standards. And the next slide is the rest of them. And here we have some areas where we're showing some growth. Using strategies of self-regulation to manage verbal and physical self-control, following school and classroom routines and procedures, and demonstrating active listening and respectful responses to opinions and ideas different from one's own. And finally, some areas where we're seeing a little bit of some decrease. Asking for help, communicating feelings and needs, producing quality work, and completing learning tasks. So that's kind of some an overview of where that is in the data. I do want to stress that this data is incomplete, but it will be complete by the end of the year, and we'll have a much better picture. A couple of other things to keep in mind. With COVID, mask wearing, hybrid, and those kind of things, we've also seen a decrease across the board K-12 in our discipline referrals. And so there's other variables at play here in this particular data, given the year that we've had. Any questions about that data?
You do? Okay.
I didn't really, what do you mean by the last statement that you made about discipline referrals and what that had to do with this? I apologize, I didn't get the connection.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, some of those behaviors would be referring to like a student being able to listen and participate in class and those kind of things. And so other discipline referrals have been down. And so things that a teacher might consider discipline because a student isn't listening or those kind of things could be involved in some of the things where barriers we're seeing because of COVID and in hybrid and just smaller class sizes, masks, and those kind of things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
On average, how much time are we spending on the SEL curriculum in class teaching?
It's varying by school. All of our elementaries are doing morning meetings, which are running, depending on the structure, anywhere between 10 and 30 minutes a day. And then it varies by teacher probably throughout the day as they're adding or supplementing that.
And is this something that we're going to consistently have as a consistent 10 to 30 minutes every day of school on this?
Yes, as we move forward, I believe that we will keep elements of that. We have some success tied to that in schools that we're doing morning meetings prior to COVID, in schools that just began that during this school year. So there's some evidence of success in that morning meeting plan.
Madam Chair, Mrs. Mon, if I remember right, this effort is under our continuous improvement plan, the whole child section, or is it
Yes.
instruction?
It is in our continuous improvement plan. I cannot remember exactly which section.
I remember that it is, yeah, same thing. I don't know which section, but yeah.
Madam Chair, if I can ask a question of Mrs. Mon, can you help me see what, or explain to me like what a morning meeting would look like and how these things are a part of a morning meeting? I love the idea, but I think it's fantastic. Can you maybe just paint a picture for me a little bit of how this is used in a morning meeting and how a teacher would use this in the classroom?
Sure. We have a couple of different curriculums being used in the and piloted out in our schools. There's Second Step, and then there's Zones of Regulation. And a morning meeting is a time where the class comes together in a normal year, maybe on the rug together where we can physically be kind of close, but maybe not so much physically close this year. And they spend some time talking about what it might mean to be respectful, or maybe they spend some time talking about what you do when you get angry and or with those kind of feelings. And so they just spend some time talking through those things or doing a lesson and learning some tools.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are we just doing this at the elementary, or are there things in the secondary as well?
There are some things in the secondary as well. We're utilizing the core project at the high schools, at Skyview and Nampa High in some of our mentoring classes. I will say, I believe that it has been difficult to get to that this year with the changes in scheduling. And so I don't know how consistent that has been, probably more consistent for some than others. And Columbia has been utilizing some career competencies in their mentoring. And so we are seeing that across the high schools. We have 2 middle schools utilizing Second Step curriculum in their advisory times.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Mon, do you foresee as we build this out, we'd be more consistent in the secondaries, or would it always be variable from building to building?
I think the part that will be consistent is we're all moving forward into this as we prepare as we get ready to do this and as we look at data and prep buildings to move forward. But I do think we'll probably be at different spaces for a little while until we until we all have an opportunity to go through that learning curve of going into SEL curriculum.
And so is the idea, I mean, obviously, to me, things are a lot easier in elementary because you've got the same teacher teaching all the subjects. And so the ability to weave this in to other things seems much easier than at the secondary level. I know you had mentioned like during advisory time, so would that be kind of the idea that it would be in a generalized time, not so much like in science class, this is what we're doing, or in English, we're adding this component, or is it more in type of an advisory setting?
Great question. We actually believe as buildings have done this uniformly, so they all are giving the same lesson on the same day or in the same week, they kind of have a focus, then they're able to give that lesson during advisory and then refer to those components when needed throughout the day, throughout their content, because they're all accessing that same content at the same time.
Thank you. Any other questions? We're good. Thank you very much for the update.
Thank you.
The curriculum, SEL curriculum purchase update.
Yes, so that's a perfect lead in. I'm Phyllis Vermillier, and I want to thank you for allowing me to share an update for our comprehensive health curriculum adoption. So next slide. We started this adoption. You can go to the next one. Yeah, perfect. Back in February of 2020, so almost a year ago. And we were focused on these three areas: materials, implementation, and planning professional development. We are looking at materials right now. Lori shared about the professional development that we've had with Keith Orchard. We are beginning to talk about implementation. And you can go to the next slide. This is just a reminder of our committee members, what they have committed to do. And again, they did not realize that they would be signing on for more than 2 years. But they have been wonderful to work with, even in this time. Next slide. So we have a total of 23 members. 56% are educators, and 43% are parents and community members, which is way above what is required. But because we are doing comprehensive health, we wanted to make sure that we had outside providers that could share their resources. And in your board packet on page 2, there are specific information about each board member, our committee member. All right, so our committee work, we started at the top, of course, and did the research. We created the committee. Again, back in February, we started building that capacity, went into the research of comprehensive health plans. And we actually identified 5 components of a comprehensive health plan. You can turn to the next slide. Those health components are there: SEL, mental health, safety and prevention, substance abuse, physical health, and environmental and community health. And again, in your board packet, there on page 3, there are more details about each one of those components. The committee then looked at standards, and Lori has shared about those SEL standards. CASEL stands for Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, and they are the national group to turn to for SEL standards. And so we have used their framework to base our standards on. Again, there are several pages in your board packet about CASEL if you need more information. So then the committee looked at programs and curriculum to review. It was important to review the programs schools in the district have been piloting, as Lori had mentioned. And then the committee also added other curriculum through their research to review. So your board packet talks about more of these. We have EverFi, Character Strong, Paths, Second Step, Zones of Regulation, the Core Project, and Summit Learning. And you were also invited to attend our public viewing on Thursday and Friday of this week. You should have received an invitation for that. Next slide. So to review what has been done since last February, we asked and received 21 rubrics on programs schools have been piloting from teachers and counselors. And that does span K through 12, actually pre-K through 12. Our committee members have been trained and are reviewing all 7 of those curriculum that you just saw. And we will be meeting, go ahead, next slide, on February 10th to look at all of that feedback, as well as what parents and community give us on Thursday and Friday of this week. And then the goal is to provide a menu of options for recommendation to the board by February 16th. As schools begin implementing either positive behavior interventions and/or social emotional learning, then they will have a menu to choose from. Those are the facts, and I am happy to answer any questions that I can.
Chairman Simpson, so on February 16th, there will be an action associated with us. You notice that the meeting is pretty close to it, so we thought we would bring all of the background information to you now so that you understood what the process and that the committee was appropriately structured, that you would have an opportunity to actually view the materials so that hopefully we can make a decision for purchase going forward on February 16th.
Thank you. Any questions? Go for it, Trustee Westfall, you want to start your questions?
Yeah, I've been struggling to formulate my questions tonight.
I just didn't want to always go first, but I don't. So you mentioned the piloting,
Yes.
and we heard from Lori about how, core and second step were already being used in the schools, and they're on your list here. So you mentioned the feedback from the open house. Or was that feedback from those that are already using it in the pilot that
Yes.
are, okay.
Yes.
And so will we be getting that on February 16th, that feedback from the teachers already using the different programs? Will we be able to see that as part of our packet, I guess?
I'm happy to provide that. I just need direction as far as how soon that would need to be provided.
And maybe that's just a question as I was trying to understand your steps, or are you coming to us with recommendations
Yes.
of specific ones? And I would just think since, right, we're already having those used with our kids, I was trying to kind of understand that.
So would you like a summary of what we're hearing from teachers in each of these for the pilots? Is that what I hear you asking for?
I think I was just trying to understand the last bit of your slide, which was that you're getting the feedback. And knowing that it's being piloted out there. I mean, I think it would be positive to see that if it were helpful in our decisions, or with if that was something you were considering or not. This is just a different process than what I've seen, because typically what I'd seen in the past was the committees look at all the different curriculum, the board approves that curriculum, then it goes out to students. I don't remember it being piloted with our kids prior to, so I'm really just kind of asking and trying to understand a little bit of what we're going to see at the next meeting.
I'll share for just a minute. One of the things that makes this just a little bit different is we've headed down this road under some grants and some other things. And so we did have things out there, but we want to be really conscious of when it's time for us to utilize our district funds. And we have schools right now asking for access to curriculum through district funds. We want to make sure that those are board approved and they meet the criteria that we would look for. And so there is a little bit of difference in that we have extensively piloted. Often we've done like a 1 to 2 month pilot on some curriculum before it's been recommended to the board. But we can easily provide a summary of what we're hearing from teachers and from parents to the board on that night where you need to make a decision. Is that helpful?
I think that would be helpful. Thank you. And I appreciate that clarification. And yes, being that it's out, if you have gotten feedback from teachers and parents, I do, and it's easily provided. Yes, I do think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yes. I think one thing that might be a little bit of a concern is the time. Like, we know that you love to see it ahead of time, but we kind of have a number of meetings like kind of close together. So it might not be your full week when we can provide that, but we will have it at the board meeting if that's something that you would like. Does that sound all right?
I just have a question, because as I read this, I kind of interpreted it that meeting that you will be having on the 10th is kind of that where you are bringing all the feedback from all the different, from the teachers, educators who've been piloting, and then the parents in the community. And that goes into the providing the menu of options or recommendation for the board.
Okay.
So kind of that is what I had in my head. So
Yep.
thinking that maybe just, I don't know. And if we want to see all the feedback, like, I don't know that I necessarily want to see that, because I feel like the committee's going through the process, but maybe just including in that recommendation, maybe some highlights of those things, which maybe was already part of the plan. I will tell you, this menu of options is kind of throwing me off a little bit, only because I don't know what that looks like, sounds like. Nothing's been referred as a menu of options to be recommended to the board. So
Right.
that worries me just a little, in the sense that I don't know what that looks like. But yeah.
Okay. The goal is actually to provide a menu of options that schools could choose from, because they've been provided by the board. And part of that is because we have several different pilots out there, and we have different needs at different schools and different grade levels. And so we want to make sure that teachers and principals and buildings have access to the curriculum that meets their needs.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And that was really my clarifying question of what feedback are we reviewing and the process of how that's happening. I don't know that I'm still totally clear on all of it,
And
because
the board will get to come, have they already been invited to
Yes.
February 4th?
right, so
Yeah.
we have access to that as well. And if that's part of that, and then you're going to utilize that and come back to us, that's part of the siphoning of information.
Correct.
Then that's, yeah, okay, that's why we have this meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you, because we get to kind of
Yeah.
think about all those things.
It is a little different than anything we've done before. We've never done a 5-part curriculum adoption either. So we are doing our best to really be thoughtful and formal about those pieces.
No, I hear that and I appreciate that. And I do understand that across our district as a whole, there are a variety of needs. And so I completely understand where you guys are with that. And so I appreciate the complexities of this while we're also still trying to go through our processes. So thank you.
Right.
So for parents and trustees who are going to come look at the materials, and so in that section, and I'm just going to go to safety and prevention, because if a parent wants to come and see some of the bullets on there, how homosexuality, transgender, sex ed is handled, would they come and they want to look at the safety and prevention pieces? Or was there a particular philosophy going in? Help me understand some more there.
So that is another component. The only component we are addressing on Thursday and Friday is SEL.
SEL. And so the
That's
rest of
our
it is
first
still
component.
being vetted?
I'm sorry.
The other components are still being vetted.
Yes, they will be addressed when we meet again to start the process.
We haven't started the process on the other one. We have looked at NAMPA values in general about health curriculum, but we haven't started the process of digging into those other realms yet.
So they'll go through column 1, mental health, mindfulness, all that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Good question. Trustee Keller.
Yeah, let me, and I'm sorry if I am just beating this thing to death of just making sure I understand. So I apologize if I'm re-asking the same question. When I hear a menu of options, I'm nervous that I have to look at a menu and pick the best one. But what you're telling me then is we're going to bring a menu of options that we would like to provide the schools, and you would like the board to approve the full menu. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Good. I was nervous that I was having to pick just the right one. I'm like, oh no. So
No,
okay.
no. Good luck.
Yes.
No.
Okay.
But we want to provide as a menu and kind of a synopsis of the strengths of each of those, so you kind of get a good idea of some of the differences and why a school might choose one or the other.
So at our next meeting, you'll be coming to us with a recommendation saying these are the 5, or I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact number. These are the ones that we would like the district to purchase to be able to be used, and then the schools can then choose which one is the best fit for them. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much for the clarification.
Yeah. Good luck on choosing the best one. Go. I'm kidding.
And then because this does look so different, and just reminding this is a 5th of this overarching curriculum, basically. So it's not, this is the only thing we're doing. It is a 5th of the overarching, which is a little bit different in how districts and schools have gone about this process. I very much see these as, teaching kids to help themselves identify those, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And what do I need? Where am I at? How can I ask for help to get those things so that kids can come and be prepared and ready to learn and can communicate with their educators and teachers of like, this is what I need to be successful for today.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Any other?
Can I clarify one thing going back to Allison's question? I just want you guys to know that we will keep you informed when we're going to begin working on any of those other pieces. I think that the public is, and they should be, really going to be invested in some of those pieces. And so we want to be as transparent as possible. So we will be giving the board a heads up when we're ready to move on some of those next pieces.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, so Mr. Yarborough, our principal at Nampa High, and trustee Ross are here to give us an update on the graduation requirement committee.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Trustees, Dr. Keller, district office staff, thanks for the opportunity to touch base with you on the graduation requirement review committee. I don't think it's a stretch to say that the committee has had a rough couple of years getting up and going. One of the things we need to highlight is that there have been a few challenges that the committee has come up against, partly because of the dynamics of the committee. What I mean by that is, when we look at changing graduation requirements, we want to make sure that we're getting a broad spectrum view of all the stakeholders to make sure that we're helping prepare our Nampa School District graduates for what their next steps might be. If that's heading into the workforce, if it's heading into the military, if it's going on to vocational training, if it's going to university. So that's been a really diverse group of folks. And the membership over the last 2 years, there's been a number of changes, including myself. I wasn't in the district when the initial committee was put together. Our secondary director has actually went through 2 changes in that time. We had an interim with Mr. Christ, and now we have Mr. LeBeau in that. So those challenges for sure. And then we've had COVID come up over the last 2 years. Just wanted to frame what I'm going to talk about tonight. And we do see a lot of hope on the horizon and a lot of movement we're pretty excited about. The committee met last week with, members of the committee, including Trustee Ross, myself, Mr. LeBeau, Dr. Keller, met with one of the last groups we needed to get some input on before we start honing down to get a recommendation. And that was the Chamber of Commerce group for Nampa, connected with some higher ed folks and what they will contribute to the conversation. That group had not been able to meet for some time due to COVID, and in fact had just met last Wednesday for the first time in some months. We were invited to that meeting. My co-chair on this committee, Trustee Ross, was able to get us invited, and it was really beneficial and enlightening for us to start that conversation. That leads us to where we're at as a committee. We met the 2 co-chairs, Trustee Ross, myself, Director LeBeau, and Tammy Wallen met last Thursday to come up with what our next steps are and on this committee and what we're going to do. And we wanted to update you with that tonight. So the first thing is Trustee Ross is actually going to continue to work with that chamber group to establish some education roundtables that we will be meeting and get perspective from our business community so they can give input on our graduation requirement review committee that we can bring back to the full committee. Mr. LeBeau is going to be working with Tammy Wallen to make sure that we have a verified list to the board. I believe it's anticipated for your next board meeting on the 16th to have an actual updated of all the folks on the committee to make sure that they are actually approved by the board. I believe that can be handled in a consent agenda was our conversation and the hope that we were having. So we would have an actual committee list. And I am working to develop a survey to get to some of our students, particularly those about to graduate, to gauge a little bit deeper into the impact that COVID has had on the student perspective of what is needed for our folks who are graduating, what they may need for the skills of whatever their next step is. Again, we've talked about those. And so we're actually going to gather some more data for that. Once those 3 pieces are done, we do plan on then convening the entire committee back together for probably 2 to 3 meetings over the next 3 to 4 months to come up with hopefully an answer to the charge that this committee was originally given. And that would be to have 3 recommendations for the board to consider about what the graduation requirements for the Nampa School District will be. We are targeting the May or June board meetings for those recommendations to come to you. But we've got some work over the next 2 weeks and then 3 months for sure that we're going to be pounding away on that. Again, we're starting to see some movement thanks to Trustee Ross for getting us an audience with the chamber group. And once we finalize our committee membership again and replace some of those folks that have moved on, we'll be able to move forward and garner and filter all the information. We've already, all the information work we've already had done by this committee to boil down to 2 or 3 recommendations for the board to consider. So just really it's a status update is what I have for you tonight. Our big pieces are that we are actually moving and have had some meetings, and now we have some action plans for some of the folks on the committee as we build toward meeting as a full committee to get you recommendations. So I would answer any questions I could for you if you have for me, and I'm ready to take those.
Thank you. You have any questions, Trustee Westfall?
Thanks, Trustee Ross.
Trustee Keller?
No questions for me. Thank you. Thanks for the good work you're doing.
Yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate it, both of you, for your time and for the update. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item is policy 1300, district policy discussion. And you should see, so Trustee Westfall and myself, we're kind of looking at this piece of things. And I know that I've spoken in the past about, you know, it's the board's job to be policy. That's us, right? And so feeling like we're not really doing our job, that we rely really heavily on the superintendent and her team to guide us through this, and not to say we don't appreciate it and you haven't done a wonderful job, but I kind of was thinking like we need to do more. Like we need to take some of this and have some ownership here in this process. And so we wanted to kind of look at the language of this and really just visit, like, and look at how does this happen. I know Trustee Westfall and I kind of were, it was just, we don't really know. Like, we haven't really dug into this policy. And even though we're on the policy committee, we didn't know what our current policy said of how we do things. So we kind of just brought forward some ideas and things that we thought, and taking things from previous or the ways that we were doing things. So if you guys want to look that over, so just to kind of clarify, this is not a first read, but I think the way we would envision it is that next meeting on February 16th, that would be our first read. And so if we had recommendations or things that you all saw that you thought, nope, keep that, get rid of that, or add this kind of things as we're going over this policy, that's what this process would begin to look like. And I don't know that necessarily adding one more time of viewing the policy is helpful, but I almost think because we are such a young board, that it is a good idea to have that policy just in front of our eyes one more time. And it may come to be something where we look at the policy and we're good with it, right? So it's just the reviewing of that process and nothing needs to be changed. So we may not have to have a first and second read, but we've just reviewed it, we've addressed it, and then we can move on. I do know that one thing, and I kind of generalize, like, here's a yearly plan and just pick months. And I know Trustee Westfall and I kind of talked of like, what would that look like? Because like, that's a lot in 1 month to go through. And it wasn't, I honestly bought myself a notebook today to start kind of going down and picking apart to really get it on a calendar and organized and be kind of strategic. And I talked a little bit with the superintendent about kind of looking at those timeframes of like when, so that it's not like we got to hurry and have another meeting because we got to update this and do this. But when are those times of the years where we really are being intentional at looking at the policies we need to? And then there's still, of course, if there's just a need that arises or something that comes up, that we can always look at those things. It doesn't have to be in this specific order.
Thank you, Trustee Simpson, for your time and effort on putting this together. And I agree with you. This is what we're here for, is our main role is the policy. And I know over the years, things have come up and I'm like, oh, I don't know if we have a policy for that. Or now, I think I've brought it up multiple times. We are recording on Zoom our meetings now. where does that go in our records and retention policy? Are we supposed to be recording those, or are we just supposed to be live streaming those? And they're things that I think of, but don't ever get translated down to the policy or looking at that. And so it's nice to see this. Same with when something new comes up. And I know in the past, I've asked the superintendent, and she's recognized the same need for that policy, and that ISBA is already currently writing something for that. And it takes us a while to kind of see that from ISBA, or to see the district's changes from ISBA. And so I appreciate looking into this and being more mindful about making it work a little bit better for, especially for both of you, as you've sat on this board policy for years. To your input's probably the most valuable as you've lived it.
I'll clarify, just a year for me.
And say it's actually just a year for me as
Year
well.
for each other.
Yeah,
Created this, but we didn't write down what we would do.
yeah.
We're trying to figure that out as we go.
Trustee Keller, any thoughts or questions?
No questions for me. This looks good to me. I'm excited to see what we decide moving forward, but I appreciate you putting a lot of thought and time into this. I think this is great.
What can we do to help you as we look into this more?
Well, I mean, I don't know, and maybe you don't think, because part of me wanted to sit down and put like in even years, here's what we're gonna look at. In odd years, here's what we're gonna look at. And really kind of just get it on a calendar and a rotation. I mean, I think of it similar to like, maintenance rotation and like curriculum rotation and all of those things. Uniform rotation are super important to just have it mapped out of this is what we're gonna do and here's how we're gonna work through it. But I don't know, I mean, because I'm happy to do that. And then, of course, I definitely want feedback from the superintendent and her team, because she may be like, Mandy, it's really ridiculous that you put this for March, because what we really need you looking at this in November if you're gonna make changes, or we really need you looking at this in July if you're gonna make changes for the current year. There might be things like that. So I just want to make sure that that time goes into that. And so even thinking this might be something that is like a tweak, and then we transition a little further into maybe a little bit more strategic and formalized calendar, but maybe just start targeting like, okay, it's March, so let's take a look at a few of our financial management, those 7,000 policies. And are there any that we think, and like I said, even just the review process, I feel like in my time on the board, I've yet to feel like we have even that process of just like, check, we've reviewed this. We didn't want to make any changes to it, but we have had eyes on it. And I think that's an important piece, but that, is maybe just me, so.
So as we review those topic areas, then there are certain policies that we're absolutely required to review annually.
Right.
If that annual review would appear when that section came up.
Correct.
Okay.
And I don't know, I know I can kind of see the superintendent looking at me like maybe, and I honestly just said, here's roughly the size of this. Like, where could we fit this in the month, and tried to kind of even them out to where I thought, and you'll notice I didn't do any in January. So there are some months that are left off, but gives us a little leeway on some things. I don't know.
I would just take those required annual reviews together so that it's one check mark. So that we have that really consistently. We generally do that toward the beginning of the year just to make sure that it makes sense.
Yeah.
But other than that, if you're willing to chunk, section 3,000 students.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big section. But I hear you saying that maybe over 2 years we get through that? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
You said
yeah, I
we'd do
mean,
the
I
whole
don't
thing.
know that in 1 year we could get through it. Like, I mean, as much as I would love to, I just don't think it's possible, and I don't think we would be putting the time in and like giving the time to our community to weigh in on things if changes are wanting to be made and needing to be made. I mean, I don't know. But
So your intent is not to review all of the policies in 3,000 in June,
no,
but in June, they would be policies related
Yeah.
to the 3,000 series.
we're gonna like spotlight those
Yeah.
policies.
I'm envisioning, okay, this is the month for 3,000 and the trustees go in and we just bzzz right down and go, ooh, these all look like they're still in conformance and are good. Ooh, that one looks different. Oh, how come we don't have one on this? Like, is that kind of?
Yeah,
Because then you could chunk all of these feel okay. Or no, we don't even address them at all. Or it's just that extra look is kind of what I'm hearing.
yeah.
Okay. Yep, I like it.
Would we get to a point where we'd have all the student ones together and all the personnel ones together? It's been kind of hard trying to find policies and seeing different categories named the same, or categories named the same things with different numberings. The whole
Yeah.
works.
Yeah. And I don't know the whole. I'll tell you, this really isn't, it's pushing my boundaries because I don't do well with words and writing, but I do also really like to look at it and go, yeah, what are we asking? What has our community been asking us to do? These are policies that we've set up and that community's been involved in and heard and had the opportunity to weigh in on and, so I think it's, it's just important to occasionally, kind of like you said, with the even just, times are changing. We're recording meetings, but nowhere do we have that. I haven't found it yet where we have it in our policy. We do. I just don't know where it is.
We have.
Yeah, we do. Page 605.
Thank you.
It's very detailed.
Yeah.
And procedure that goes with it. It's got a whole schedule of when we keep things like board meetings.
Yes. Perfect. See, now I got it blocked off so I can go pull it up and look at it. But I think that's the intent behind it and so definitely would love, like I said, the intent also would be that this would be on the 16th calendar meeting agenda as a first read. So if we have things, or even if we have a recommendation from the superintendent on maybe things we might and her team that might need to change, or that we see things, you guys all individually see things, bring those to that meeting to discuss during that first read.
And just as open. I like that idea.
Would the two policy members then kind of take a little deeper dive, take a look and say this, or what do you think?
I would envision that the two policy members would be taking a deeper dive into things than most and kind of saying, hey, we feel like this is out of date, or we feel like this needs to be retooled, or we're hearing from ISBA that we need policy on this and we don't, so we're going to address that and bring it up. Yeah.
I like it. I think it's good movement. If anything, we're just being mindful and it's good movement forward.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Another policy piece, right? Perfect, thank you. Draft policy 8105, it's extracurricular transportation discussion.
Yes, so that's me. This policy is being brought forward for you as a reasonable spot to hang procedure off for the district. And that's really where most of the need comes in. Most of our transportation needs are taken care of by our contractor and that one, and that's where they're, but we do have a few in-house, what we call the little white buses that don't qualify as school buses, but they're used for the golf team at Skyview, or Union uses them to make sure that they can get their kids to their activities that help support their learning, kind of thing. And we want to get some policy and procedure mostly around managing of those and doing a good job around that. So that's really what we put this out here for. The policy is very, very much a vanilla ISBA policy with a couple little things struck there, mostly because we have a contractor for our busing. And one looks like typo change.
Any questions or comments? Again, same idea, so we'll see it on next, the 16th agenda as a first read.
Thank you. And maybe like in the next week, if we kind of get into this reading more, if we have any questions, should we do those questions now in between, or should we wait till first read and then bring it up then? Because it is first read, because we get more than one opportunity is really what I'm saying. Should we maybe just bring that up in open session, since that was kind of how we did them before?
Yeah. I would see it that way. I don't know. I feel like eyes are on me, but I know, I also want you to know that this process is new. And so I may take the lead and just be like, this is what it feels like to me, but I'm not trying to just say, this is how we're going to do it. But I think, time, that's mainly I'm looking at time, like how do we fill? Part of this is to become more efficient. And I feel like hopefully we'll get to a place that maybe it is in between. Or like.
And we would just need to figure out a process to make it public.
Yeah.
So if questions came maybe to you, and then maybe we create one document that has questions with responses that we could make public.
Yeah. And I know I kind of set up a form before we had kind of talked about how, like with presentations during this, where it might work, where it is like that, where then I would just send out the form and say, okay, these are questions for policy 8105. And then, you would have access. Maybe you would say, we want Peter to have access to also help answer and comment on these questions. And then, like you said, make it public, that document piece, so everybody can kind of see it. So yeah, hopefully we can fine tune and maybe.
So did we decide to use your form? Is that what we just did?
I just know that we talked about it before, and I did kind of send it out before, but we got busy with something else. And so but no decision really was made.
Okay.
So maybe I'll test run it and send out a form tomorrow for you all. And because I already have the template made up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And I had previously asked a question, just making sure that this was buses and not vans.
True, thank you.
And it is buses.
Excellent. I think we are to SR2 fund allocation discussion.
Will you bring up the PowerPoint, please, Peter?
Yes, I did not open it beforehand, so I have to open it.
Well, okay.
It's right here.
Okay. So we prepared this afternoon for our district learning team, trying to explain the context of ESSER, and we thought it might be helpful to review it here. So next slide, please.
I gotta show it so Betsy can see it.
Thank you. I was just about to say, can you put it on the screen so I can see that? That is helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay, next slide. All right, so if you remember, way back when we budgeted on 665 units, when our average daily attendance came through that first Friday in November, and again, attendance, we earned or generated 631. So quite a deficit. We're fortunate in that the state board has created a rule which allows us to be funded this year on average daily enrollment. I don't know if that will continue to go forward for next year or not, but certainly this year, that's how we're being allocated. I suppose it could also change because the legislature has not closed up and gone. But when we do average daily enrollment, we generate 663.5 units. So that's really good news. It actually would have been higher than that if they would have funded summer school the same way they funded summer school the year before. We now understand that and will plan accordingly, but 663.5. Next slide. So you remember the 1% holdback at the end of the year that we had to end the year with 1% less revenue. And then the governor suggested a $5 million holdback later. In the top row, originally, the governor, with input from superintendents and other parties, said this is how it's going to be. So we're not going to have movement on the career ladder. We're not going to add the third tier, no leadership stipends. There was a reduction in technology and professional development funds. And there was a reduction in our discretionary operational funds. And the 2% raise that was scheduled for administrators and classified staff was also held back. The governor recently has gone back to the legislature, looked at what's in statute and what can be carried forward without the legislature acting on it, and has restructured what that 98 million looks like. The idea at this point, and all of this is pending some legislative approval, or at least not adding to it, to restore the movement on the career ladder, which is one of our priorities as a board. It was really important to us that our teachers continue to move on that. To add the third tier of the career ladder, again, really important to us, aligned with our priorities. Restore leadership stipends. This is really important. Our teachers are working hard without those stipends this year. Restore the 2% raise for administrators and classified staff. However, in order to remain and secure the $98 million in holdback, districts have to fund those changes through an additional reduction in their discretionary or operational funds. So I think that might be review, but I'll pause here for any questions. The number on the next slide represents what that means for the district. So we will see $3.1 million reduction in our discretionary funds. Now, we'll see some additional money come in for the career ladder, but we're hoping that that goes right back out to teachers. We'll see some additional money come in on leadership stipends, but that will hopefully go back out to leadership stipends, etc. So 3.1 million, just wanted you to have that number in your head. Next. Wanted to review several pots of money that we've had the privilege of receiving, ESSER 1 funds at the beginning of time, somewhere in, I don't know, April, May, June, who knows. We were allocated 4.2 million. If you remember, we set aside quite a large chunk of that for future rainy days and protect against any ADA issues. So currently there's still 1.85 million of that unexpended. The governor's relief allocation, I don't have the total there, but what, this is the piece of money that we needed to spend by December. That was moved to June, that spending date. And so currently there's about a balance of 400,000 left in there. Digital divide monies, again, through the governor's office and the State Department holdback, we received money to support our LMS, our learning management system, helped us with devices, helped us with connectivity, and we have successfully spent all of those monies in those three areas. Used part of our lease purchase agreement, have helped families with connectivity and teachers with connectivity, and put that LMS money toward the purchase of Otis. ESSER 2 funds will come to us and we can start drawing them down in March, is our understanding. I want to go back to ESSER 1. In ESSER 1, you'll remember that we had the opportunity to share with our 2 charter schools and with several private schools in the area. In ESSER 2, we still will share with our 2 charter schools who are part of our LEA. And we'll get, so we'll have 12,045,000. Some of that will come right off and will go to Idaho Arts and Gem Prep according to how it was earned. And then going back to the previous page, 3.1 million. The legislature, we believe, will not reinstate that 98 million, that we will be absorbing it in our discretionary funds. And the plan is that ESSER 2 funds would be the pot of money that schools would access in order to cover that. Okay, so yes, the number is 12 million. It will be reduced as we share, and we'll have to have a plan in order to cover the 3.1 million that we were expecting in operational funds. Okay, next. This is just a reminder and was in your board packet of the legitimate uses of the ESSER 2 funds. Many of the things were things that we also use for ESSER 1. Number 15 is probably the most important to us, because in order for us to do what the legislature has asked, we need to have a category that says this is necessary to maintain the operation and continuity of services. And so we're hoping our State Department understands what number 15 is as well, because the $3.1 million really has been allocated or encumbered at this point. But you can see the other categories there. And as we brainstorm our first look at what we think we might spend this on, we have connected it to one or more of these categories. If you're not familiar with ESEA, American with Disability Act is underneath there. IDEA, our Special Education Act, is underneath. All of those acts are authorized out of that big umbrella act. Okay, next. Before we started our conversation about potential issues or potential ways that we could spend this money, we wanted to make sure that we were prioritizing these 4 areas. Student achievement, and when we talked about that, it's about that extra time for learning. How do we make sure 3rd graders are ready for 4th grade? School readiness. How do you make sure 8th graders are ready to be freshmen, juniors to be seniors, etc. And then mental health supports for our students. Really similar with our staff retention, morale, and satisfaction, those on the front line. Mental health supports and trying to get them additional support and resources so that they can impact the first bullet point of student achievement. Safety is really important. And the 4th one's really important to us as we think about an upcoming levy election. We need to be able, whatever we do with this money, to be able to explain what we have done with it, share that with our community, and be able to communicate well. Next. All right, next. All right. In your board packet, there's a much more detailed description of this, but here are the big buckets. Let me say this. We started with a group of what I would say budget managers here at the district office. We included an elementary principal, a secondary principal, and our NEA president at the table. And we brainstormed things that we felt would be essential if we were going to make progress at moving students and making sure our staff were well cared for. Then we put these into big groups. And then tonight, actually this afternoon at 3:30, we did a very similar exercise with our administrators. Are we on the right track? Are we thinking the same thing? How are we going to make progress with our high school students over the summer, etc. So these are big pots, all right? And I do think that we have labeled all the very specific things in here. So curricular needs, this includes our ability to make sure that we know how to assess students, to understand where they are academically, what holes are there, what we need to do to make progress, intervention curriculum. Lori talked tonight about professional development that goes along with that, safety, extended learning opportunities. The word out there in the world is learning loss. And really, I think we might have experienced some learning loss in that summer, which is what we typically do. But what we really have right now is not enough time to access all of the learning that they could So our vocabulary is going to be extended learning opportunities. Could be after school, could be before school, could be summer in June, could be an onboarding in August, could be after school in the fall. But the opportunity to extend learning times for our students. Additional staffing needs, you can read all of the things that we put in that bucket. Facility updates is covered with this money, particularly related to our HVAC system. Peter has some ideas of how we would evaluate them and prioritize some things that might need to be done. Technology, you can see there, special education. Again, that goes back to item number 1, those special populations of students. Nutrition services, you know that in this time that we're likely to see a deficit in the money that's come in versus what's come out. This could be a way to bring them whole, sharing with charter schools, stipends, our leadership stipends. And again, this is probably not ESSER II funds. It's probably the general funds coming into us that will flow back out. Activities and programs, focus schools, activity venues. So for example, in the spring, some of our music programs thought that they might hold concerts outside, but you get to rent those venues as well, and that isn't in the budget, etc. Those type of things. Federal programs and plans there. Discretionary adjustment, we just talked about that. We need to be able to pay for that somewhere. Negotiated salary, classified and admin salary were on the list, but are likely funded through those new general funds that will come. And then, of course, we would suggest and would love to hear the board's opinion that we don't spend this all in one place in 1 year. These monies we can spend through September of 2023. So this is your first look. This is a brainstorm list. If you've looked at your document, you realize that we have overspent the $12 million, and we'll have to go back and pair and find a way to prioritize. So we would love to hear your ideas and thoughts, either on this work or additional things that we've missed.
Are you gonna walk us through what this that was on our chairs?
That was from the last board
That was
meeting.
from the last one, okay.
I can tell you what that was. That was our original ADA on November 1, and then converting it to enrollment. And then Randy, what was the third one from last board meeting? I don't know, Randy, can you see?
I'm sorry, I wasn't sure what the question was. I apologize.
In the last board meeting, we asked you to put together the 3 scenarios of how income would come into us. If you remember, the first one was what ADA would look like on November 1. Then you looked at enrollment on January 1, and then you looked at enrollment again on January 15th. Does that ring a bell?
Yes.
Randy, there was a handout on my space, and I didn't know if we were gonna cover that, and they said it was a leftover from the last meeting.
Yeah, I'm completely drawing a blank. I apologize that I don't know what you're talking about.
No, that's okay. It's just trash from the last meeting, I think, that was up there.
Any questions, comments? Trustee Keller?
Just for clarification, I guess my question is this something we will be voting on or making movement on or whatever at the next meeting, or is this just still informational as we make decisions?
I think that you'll actually vote on this. We would love for you to entertain the idea to vote on in these big buckets. I really would like to hear your thoughts about savings and what piece of money you would like to see set aside for use in the future or not. But then we would bring these big buckets to you and say, here's what we're thinking that we're doing. And then we would like you to take action on it.
Oh, thank you. Great.
We got to see a lot of information about brainstorming among different groups that you shared. Pay popped up. In the first half of the school year, we did a stipend to recognize the hard work that happened in that first half. We do that same thing for the hard work for the second half of the year.
So I don't know what will come to fruition. Probably our priority would be to get our folks moved over on the salary schedule and get them paid for that movement. That certainly is a bigger increase than anything that we gave them in the fall. And so that really is our priority. There are some groups of people who have worked the front line, like our nurses, some of our extended resource rooms. So some of those thoughts came about how we could honor them for their work. There isn't at this point anything specific in the first round of brainstorming outside of that. Certainly the leadership stipends would flow through, but that would be general fund money.
And those we saw already, didn't we?
Those we saw already.
Did Gwen bring this to us?
I don't know whether, I think we didn't because we knew we weren't going to get it, but Gwen has already convened the meeting or will convene the meeting so that will come through the proper channels and probably on a consent agenda also in February for you.
So the chunks for the pay for this year would go to negotiations?
Yes. The general fund monies, yes. And on your paper, you can see what we anticipate. And we're pretty sure because we now know who our staff is and where they're placed. And in February of the year, we can get pretty close. So you can see those monies that we anticipate for the salary movement.
So last year we took a 1% hit to the discretionary, then we had to shrink it by 5%. And then there's another giant percentage that's shrinking mid-year.
Yes.
So in terms of savings, what do you think you would need to keep things stable-ish? Because the legislature won't come in and give us the whole difference, right?
Right. Well, I think the legislature has been clear this year that they don't want to make up any of that difference, that they would like to be cost neutral and that districts would bear that burden because of the ESSER II funds. So we think that is probably what might happen. One of the things we're concerned about is we do believe we need to support staff through some smaller class size, maybe additional staff for working with groups of children that have larger gaps or specific gaps. Our concern is we don't want to increase that a lot and then have a pretty steep cliff after 1 year. So I don't know what that number is, but we would like to have some money for that next year in order to come back off some of that increase in staffing, because it is really one-time money. So we don't have those specific details, Trustee Westfall, but that is a concern that we have.
So if I'm understanding what I'm hearing, there's some staff we want to continue that were one time to continue to meet needs. And you probably have a better idea of what that would be. And then is there just anything for discretionary as you look at increasing health costs, other costs?
Well, I do think that at least in this year covering, so whether you cover the 3.1 million in our discretionary loss through ESSER I funds, and then some carry forward from the year, that could be one way to do it, or whether or not we budget just in the ESSER II funds, multiple ways to do it in the different pots of money. But that is we will need to cover the 3.1 million through one of those pots of money. Is that the question you asked?
Well, I'm trying to get a feel. You wanted some thoughts on savings. So yeah, it makes sense to save some in my head, given that it's a pretty big hit.
The good news also in looking for next year, it seems like they're going to start where we would have bid and move forward from that. So we don't anticipate a huge discretionary hit in the next year's round of funding. So that's really helpful.
And say that was my
So not another
concern, is
3.1
like,
million.
yeah, are we starting all over again? Yeah,
The numbers that we've seen would indicate that we're not going to start at, I think it went down to as low as only 21,000 per discretionary unit. And I think it will start again at the 28, 29.
okay,
That's what those are the numbers that we have seen in discussions.
okay. Yeah, I think, for me, I'm thinking those extended learning opportunities, like you said, will probably need to continue through 2023 and maybe even beyond that. So thinking about those things and possibly saving, like you said, so not putting it all in right away, because I think it is gonna need to be some gradual extended learning opportunities provided.
The other thing that we're concerned about is as we're beginning to budget, looking at our FTE for next year and looking at our enrollments, there are a lot of things that are uncertain. So we're down 800-ish kids. What part of that will come back? Will they come back? Will it be at the elementary? Will it be at the middle school, the high school? And so having a reserve will help us if we aren't able to predict that extremely accurately. And there are a lot of variables this year.
Did we lose additional students? I think that was a fear when we were gonna go full-time, that some parents still wanted to stay in hybrid. Did we lose those, or?
We have seen some movement. Some of it is swapping. Some of it who now want to be online, and some who are online coming back to us, or in homeschool coming back to us. So we've seen some swapping. We don't believe we have a really clear picture at the secondary yet, because we're not sure if our enrollment roles are completely accurate. So we kind of looked at that. I say that because we didn't have the traditional dip from December to January. And so we think that feels different than what it has before. So we're checking those numbers in PowerSchool.
Madam Chair, if I can ask a question. Superintendent, can you explain to me the traditional dip between January or December and January? I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, unfortunately, when our kids look at their grades, and their grades indicate that they have failed a class or didn't earn credit. And if they look at the picture and they say, gosh, I'm a sophomore and I only have 10 credits to my name or 12 credits to my name, then they can often become discouraged, and we can lose them at that point. We try to capture them at Union. We work with our charter school, Pathways in Education. We try to find other places, but Trustee Keller, there generally is a decrease, particularly in our secondary between those semesters.
Okay, thank you. That's what I assumed. I just wanted to make sure I was thinking. One other question I have is I'm looking at the graph that is in the packet of the COVID relief funds brainstorming ideas. Would you say that you have put these in order of, starting at things that you feel like are the most important, going down? Are they are they just in any kind of order? Or do you feel like you were able to start at the beginning, if that makes sense?
Yes, and there is no particular priority or order. They're just grouped in big buckets because we've done some brainstorming, and now we need to go back and do some prioritizing.
Okay, and will it be prioritized before the next meeting? Or is that just going to wait? I'm not being critical. I just don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, we'll certainly make that number come out to the amount of money that we have. Will cause some priorities. We might be able to put some things, say at the top, saying this is really important, and it perhaps decreases.
Right.
If we can do that, we will do that.
Okay, it's not, I just was curious looking, okay, is curricular needs like number one? Because that's the top, I was just wondering if it had been prioritized, but I think it makes sense how it is to just kind of have them in pots as you've explained it. So thank you.
Chairman Simpson,
Yeah.
I think as you were asking for feedback, as I ponder these monies, I kind of think of them as a little bit of helping keep us whole. And I'm thinking, is this something that it's instead of having as a standalone list of needs as extras that we're receiving, that we absolve it into our overall budget and everything that we do as a district. And so you had mentioned, right, like enrollment. We don't really know quite yet what that's going to look like, and we're going to adjust appropriately and definitely budget appropriately for next year. How can these monies help that? We're also looking at like our levy. That's an unknown for us as well. Potentially, how could these monies help plug that as well, so that we're not running with 3 separate reports of ideas of funds, but using these to help plug holes and keep us whole with these unknowns, so that, yeah, our enrollment's down, but we get to retain quite a few teachers and use it that way. Maybe we aren't successful with the levy or change our priorities of that, and we're able to utilize this for that nature. So, and I don't know the time frame that you need to have access to these funds to start, when we get them and when you need to start to use them. If the next meeting is premature in approving all of these funds right away, without really having a little bit of that bigger picture of the overall budget, at least a little bit more closely defined. Those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering if you could talk about the brainstorming ideas. And so there's the negotiated salary estimate of need. And are those, we have other funds, general, are we mixing that in with the COVID relief?
So what we tried, no, not necessarily. What we tried to do is to honor brainstorming, which means keeping all ideas on the floor. And those ideas, we certainly agree that we would like to make sure that our teachers get their movement. So that came up. And then on your sheet, we said, probably, well, where we would fund this first is from those general funds that are coming our way. So that's what that sheet is attempting to do. It might be that if it's appropriate, we could use some of those, remembering that it's one-time money. So that's what we tried to do there. There's some federal things that we could take out of Title I funds. So it's not the only source. Those things are all legitimate excuses under title. The leadership stipends, for example, again, came up as a need, stayed on the list, but we've identified the $970,000 coming in to us in general funds with those adjustments really as the source that we would use for that. Does that help you understand that sheet?
Yeah, Kim, I appreciate what you said. I think our next meeting, we would have gotten our February payment from the state. By the time we meet again, could be the day before.
Randy, when does the February payment come to us?
Yeah, February 15th is when it comes, but I mean, reality is I pretty much know what we're getting now. They haven't put all the new reports in. But I mean, they've updated the average teacher salary already for the new career ladder amounts, and I've just got to make sure that they're taking the right unit calculation that we had already been told that we're going to get.
Any other questions? Comments? Trustee Keller?
Well, I'm good, thank you. As far as feedback goes, I do think saving money is great. I think that's a great idea to have some put aside. If that's what you're looking for, I agree.
I think, sorry,
Nope, you're fine.
because Mr. Jers is here and we just recently had a nice facilities update. And a good chunk of money here is going to be able to go to HVAC. Will that help, just an understanding when we get to that point of just thoughts to know, hey, does that help these funds, or are they true? Because I know that was on our list as well. And so just some understandings of those. And that's why I said, starting to integrate all the different plans that we have as a district that we've been apprised of before, that gives us that understanding and picture of what you're doing. I was just thinking of that HVAC as well. I
think many of these things go to your first point about keeping the district whole.
Yeah.
They are here because we do have to keep track of them all separately. We can bring them in and say, here's the picture. And in a year where our enrollment may be uncertain, we do have a little more room in order to keep us whole, to help our teachers make progress with students. And then we just have to plan that out a little bit further. And you are right, there's some natural overlaps here. So HVAC could be out of supplemental. It could be out of ESSER, would be a qualified thing. Yeah. Okay.
Nothing else.
What we'll do is we'll bring you what we have and you can decide whether or not it's enough for you to take action on in February, and we can postpone that if you need to. We'll see how far we get in.
And help us understand, because we don't want to hamper you of when you're going to need access to those funds as well, would be great.
All right. Perfect. The next item, I think, is the property, correct?
Yes,
It is.
Mr. Jers.
Okay, so the 920 Lake Lowell property is affectionately called the block building because it's made out of cinder blocks. But we've been chatting with the city. The city's very interested in the property to help them connect the green belt with everybody in the area and have some of their equipment in there like we did with that one. So they're interested in purchasing the property from us. We have a formal offer from them for $415,000. We have the legal documents that we need to look at that. A couple of the details that are important with that is they asked for a couple pieces to come off of that. It's a building where we've inherited it. We haven't done any maintenance on the roof. It's got a really old roof, so they asked for some concessions there. It has a 30-year-old septic system, 30-plus-year-old septic system. They asked for a few concessions there. Those all seemed very reasonable. So that puts it right in line with our appraisal, subtracting those concessions for those couple older pieces on the property. So that's what we're looking at. We're working with our legal team to get it all properly done. They've given us the resolution that you'll have to do at the next meeting. And I think that's all.
Yes.
So this wasn't bought with bond money. Which building was that?
This building.
We just get to keep the sales and.
Correct.
Yes.
This is one that we
Yes.
get to keep the sales on, yes.
Madam
Which is
Chair,
it's important to remember that, like, depending on what type of money we use to purchase or build buildings and property depends on how we can utilize that money if we sell. So that is a great question and something that we do need to realize.
We would recommend that when we sell that this does go into a facilities account. It is generated from facilities. We think it should be there in order to continue to support the district with facilities.
And we paid for the new warehouse with the old Parkview side, right?
And have
Yeah.
some money in addition to that in that same account.
Yes. Sorry, Trustee Keller.
yeah, no problem. I'm just having a straight up curiosity question because I've driven past that building a million times, not being aware that the school district owned it. What is the current purpose? What has it been used for? And do we have a place to put whatever is being housed in that building? You know, just curious what that looks like.
It was mostly the landscaping. And when we bought the new warehouse downtown on 17th Street, 17th Street, we moved most of that stuff down there to do that. The other one is we had a building on First Street, 1510 First Street, that was nutrition services at one point. That's where we moved the curriculum storage that was in the black building over to there. So that's where that's gone. So we've used those two existing, or the one new facility, one existing, to kind of replace what it was doing.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions or?
So I think our only question would be, would you like to see this on the consent agenda, or would you like to see this as an action item in new business?
How do you, I know, so typically if one trustee wants to pull something from the consent agenda, in my mind, this is a consent agenda item, but if it is something that you guys feel like we need to have separate and have for discussion, we are happy to just put it on the agenda as part of the new business.
I appreciate this new format that we've talked about it and had questions and seen it. It gives us more time to look at it, and I'm comfortable with it being on consent.
Trustee Keller.
Madam Chair, that was what I was going to say, what Trustee Ross said, which is I appreciate the opportunity today to ask questions. And so having those answered, I have no reason for it to not be on the consent agenda.
Trustee McFall. And then, of course, if Trustee Kemp would like to remove it, but what I think in the agenda planning, the superintendent and I will just put it in the consent agenda. Excellent.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So we come to the last item, and if we cover this in 4 minutes, we've done this in 2 hours. So this is just really an update for you. You know, we've tried to, we have a separate athletic plan. We've added a section to our reopening plan that addresses athletics. And then, as you're aware, at least I've tried to keep you aware in the Friday letters, we've had multiple changes come out of the governor's office. We have SIC working on this, and we have IHSA working on state tournaments. So this is really my attempt to help you be aware of the changes that are happening. This currently is what the SIC 5A superintendents have agreed on. We believe it will be adopted by the 4A, and we believe this is also the format that we'll see at state tournaments after talking with IHSA. Basically, the two teams home and away will each have the ability to ticket 150 people. The math is on a varsity team competing at state that they would seat no more than 15 players, which is generally in basketball really reasonable. You have your 12 plus you bring up 3 JVs. If you only happen to seat 12 players, then those tickets can move somewhere else. Then 4 folks, adult or students, per player on the roster team, 10 cheerleaders plus their 4 people. And then there would be an additional 50 tickets that teams could use for themselves. If they wanted to bring the pep band, they could use those tickets for that. If they wanted to have a student section, they could use those tickets to that. If they wanted to share them with additional parents or whatever, but each team, visiting team, would have 150. 5A has looked at the facilities that we can house these in, and if you go on down, is there more on here? I think.
It moves to wrestling.
Okay, and then it moves to wrestling. And wrestling is a little more tricky. When you talk about 15 or 16 weight classes, and then you've got 11 teams, we can't accommodate 1,600 people and reasonably physically distance them. And so we are looking at Meridian High as our venue, 2 tickets per wrestler. And then we are thinking about how we can be a little more creative. We've agreed to support it with some additional security, SROs. Each of the districts would pitch in to cover that or to help with that. People would, masking is required, physical distance, so family groups can be together. 6 foot is the distance. And we've agreed that we would have administrators from both teams in attendance to help facilitate and to make things run smooth. So again, wanted you to be aware this, we made the corrections to the athletic plan based on the last action that the board has taken. So anyway, I just wanted you to be aware, we believe that this is what is going to happen at state as well. We're already talking about spring events. The good news is our spring events are outside. And we have a lot more flexibility with our outside venues. Yes, so that's what I wanted to tell you or to keep you informed about. And we'll try to make all of those corrections to the athletic plan and anything else that comes our way by the 16th.
Do you feel like you're hurting cats? Might be my first question. I feel like you're doing a lot of
What's really
updates.
nice is that SIC has done a really nice job trying to think and care for everybody. And really appreciate the partnership that we have with our SIC schools.
Chair Simpson, I really do have 2 real questions.
Okay.
When will the 4 SICs gather for the 4A to decide if they are comparable with what the 5A is decided on?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, and with the extra.
We meet tomorrow morning, the superintendents meet tomorrow morning,
Okay.
so we should will be, I think, close
Okay,
to, yeah.
to having a good idea so that for the 16th meeting. And then the additional SROs, are our SROs okay and on board for the extra support?
In this particular case, they'll be Meridian and they'll be West Ada,
Okay.
so they've made those arrangements.
Okay, perfect. Those are my only 2 questions. Thank you.
Perfect.
And I do know at Capitol, like that they have 2 SROs already scheduled. And yeah, so yeah. I know.
I really just want to say, we got through each item in 15 minutes. I'm pretty excited about it. This is pretty well.
There may be items on the 16th agenda that you may go, wait, why weren't they on this? And I will just tell you that I kind of made an executive decision as we're transitioning into this. There were some things that wouldn't be prepared and given the right amount of time to be in this meeting. And so no, the other thing is we really also looked at like the size of the agenda for this meeting as well and kind of filling out the time and how much. And so I appreciate your guys' willingness and the district team's willingness to be patient with us through this process and be flexible and help us to try and work this out. We do, we have the 16th meeting. We've scheduled a March 1st meeting in a similar fashion. And then we feel like probably on the March regular scheduled meeting agenda, there will be a possible discussion and action for how do we feel like it's going and moving forward. And so just so that's on the forefront of your mind and kind of thinking about as we move forward.
So for the workshops, the packet will be done by end of day on Friday, right? Or that.
Yeah, for that Monday, yep,
Yeah. So then we can just hang on to our questions.
yes.
Yeah, and then the other one, we'll just stick with the Tuesday before or the Monday before?
I think we said Monday, didn't we, before?
Yeah.
A week out?
It wasn't decided.
That's right, we didn't
set
really
no
discuss
deadlines.
it.
Yeah, it wasn't.
What are we talking about?
So
For the
our
regular
hope is it
meeting.
would be that week before, but Monday is a different sort of cat than a Tuesday.
Tuesday, yeah.
materials.
we'll,
Yeah,
and I'll be honest, there may be work sessions where it's gonna be Thursday, because if I'm gonna take a Friday off, I'd like to be able to do that. I mean,
Right,
so
yes.
it may be sooner
Oh,
Yeah.
for the work sessions,
for the
yeah.
work session, yeah.
like getting
Don't- Friday
it by,
deadlines are
everything's
not-
due by Wednesday kind of deal. Yeah. And so I'm just asking and hoping that everyone will be flexible as we kind of try to figure this out and what may work and what isn't gonna work as we work through it. Appreciate that. And
I'm kind of
Yeah.
reviewing, is the draft for the next week's agenda pretty close? Not close.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna meet on
We've
Wednesday.
started to, yeah.
We've
Yeah.
started it, but,
Yes.
right, and
Yeah.
anything from here that we thought would be there is on there.
Yeah,
But there's
I
still
can
more.
tell you, I
you're saying.
added a
Yeah.
couple of things today, yeah. Consent
Yeah.
agenda items will keep coming, so,
yeah.
Will we do Day on the Hill here? Are we gonna do something here or not?
So I did send out an email about availability for Day on the Hill to possibly be here. I think everybody except for Betsy possibly are available. There were some tentative, like, just keep us posted. I think before the end of this, probably by Thursday. Is that okay if I have a decision?
Oh, if you'll let us know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
does that work?
Yep.
yes.
And so you'd like to reserve this room?
Yeah, for that Monday and do,
we're not here.
Oh,
It's a holiday.
yeah, it is a holiday, yeah.
okay.
And so that might be another discussion, but I'll speak with the superintendent.
It'll be available for you.
Yeah. So. Okay. Thank you guys, this meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
And I did, this was,
Is that? No, Andy left them.
yeah, this was my 33-512.
Nice.
Thank you, ladies, for letting me join.
I'm
virtual.
leaving the outdoors.
Okay.
Awesome. You did that? Yep.